Hey guys, and welcome back for a video about one of your and our favorite topics, that is Afterlife. So today we're going to talk about the new release by Kevin de Vries, Dance With Me, a track that a lot of people have been waiting for almost a year, I suppose. And now it's finally out, and we're going to analyze it. We're going to have a look at the beat and the melody, how everything works together. And you can get the free project file for this as a download. Just follow the link in the description to find out in detail how Kevin de Vries worked on his track. So first of all, let me tell you, I sampled the vocal out of the track, just the Dance With Me, so we have a little more the feeling of the track, and then the break I didn't really rebuild, I just focus on the beat and the melody and how it works together. So we're gonna have a brief listen and have an overview about what's happening here, and then let's look at the individual tracks and how they are made.
Dance with me.
So that's enough to already have a little overview about what's happening here. We're gonna start on the kick and bass group, and here we have two things to talk about: the kick and a bass line that takes a lot of space in the track and is very much up front. So let's start on the kick drum first. We have an 808, and well, obviously we have an 808, the typical kick drum for Afterlife sounds and anything that is kind of melodic or has some deep housey elements to it. And here I use two layers, so I kind of so I'm gonna play you the two layers. So first of all, we have this one, which is only the click, and I've used this kind of upward compression, right, to put the transient a little louder right here, so we get everything from below here on the multiband. If I put this off, we get like a real strong click, which also Kevin has in his track. And then we have another layer which is more focused on the low and kind of mid area, a little bit of saturation, and the two go together into another unit of saturation here. And if we have the look at the kick drum here through some maxoscope, this is what it looks like. So very similar. The click might be a little different. What we've used here on the click is some pitch envelope, right? So pitch envelope is always super useful for kick drums to make them even more clicky, because what will happen is, same as if you use it in a synthesizer, if you use a very short envelope, like some milliseconds or like some 10, 20, 30 milliseconds, then you will have this very short peak of frequencies, which will result in a very short peak of volume, and therefore you have this kind of click to it, which is also very much the way you use for making psytrance kicks, for example. But this one has more of an 808 feeling, so we got the character anyway. Let's move on to the bass line, which is simple 16 rolling notes, while the focus is very much on the last two and not the first two, or like not like this, for example, which would also be very common. But we rather have this, right? So you can hear there's like a focus on the offbeat, and the sound is actually not that difficult, right? If we have a look at it, we have a 24 dB low pass filter, and it's very low, like on 70 Hertz, and it gets opened by the envelope. If we have a look at the matrix, right, we have envelope 2 opening it up by 48, and then we have a saw wave and a sub oscillator right on the -1 octave to just make it a little more subby and strong in the bass. And what's really important is actually the unison, right? So what we have here with LFO1 is just some kind of random movement on the oscillator position and the oscillator warp, right? Oscillator B, I put this off so you can ignore this, but oscillator A, right here, oscillator 1, we have position and warp, which is both modulated through the LFO1, and this one is set to random, right? So it randomly moves the position and the warp a little bit here and there, right? But not that much. So what this did to the sound is that it kind of makes it feel more alive, and in this, well, you could even argue it feels a little more analog like this. But what's really important is the unison, as I said before, because we want to get this kind of changes in the pitch and also a little bit of whiteness. The bass line is definitely white. So what we should do here, what I didn't do yet, is add a mid-side EQ, right? So what mid-side EQing means is that you basically have a mono signal and a side signal, a mid signal and a side signal, right? So this is like a little complicated on the technical side, but still you can easily understand that if you do this on the side signal and leave the mid signal like this, what will happen is you cut away all the stereo information that is in the bass and you're left with only the mono signal of the bass, which is very good because we don't want stereo information in our sub bass and maybe even in our like bass around the 200 hertz here. So we can do it like this and push just a little bit here to, you know, because we take away some frequencies on the sides, but we take them away. So we have to add a little bit and then it will sound like this. I also lowered the width here just a little bit, added some sidechain, and that's it for the kick and bass. So moving on to the tops, which are also going through a glue compressor, by the way. The same goes for the kick and bass, but it's kind of very standard, right? So first of all, we have the snare, and this is a typical 606 snare. Couldn't be much more of a 606. And what we have on here is just some gradual sound design, not that much, right? Usually it sounds like this. So characterized by this kind of higher pitch in the bass note and then this very, very sustained noise. So what we do is we add even a little more of the noise, make it even a little more brighter. Also, it focuses much more on the higher mids, right? So there's like much more of a strong hit on the higher mids, and then we'll add just a little bit of room here with a hybrid reverb and take away the frequencies we don't need, like the very high frequencies, the very low frequencies, and therefore we can emphasize just a little bit around the higher mids. And then we have some hi-hats and cymbals here. Put them in a drum rack, but it's really actually only like the 808s and 909s, and it does sound very similar already, so there might be even like more complicated samples used in his track, but like this is totally fine to have the kind of idea on how it works, right? Because what happens is we have the cymbal like this, like a very, very low played on the kick note here on the cymbal, and then we have a very loud note on the offbeat. We have a offbeat hi-hat, and the 16th hi-hat you're gonna listen, it's very like groovy and moving around and not really feeling like a 16th at all. So I kind of, you know, I made the sound very quiet in the first place, and then I did this kind of weird velocity. So yeah, this is what it sounds like. And also here it's very important on the hi-hats and cymbals to have this very strong sidechain, because what you can definitely hear in his tracks, that everything is kind of very, the kick controls everything, right? The kick is very strong and therefore everything is kind of pushed back when the kick plays. So this is how the beat works, and now let's move on to the synthes. So starting with the arpeggiator, that's very interesting here, the arpeggio, because, well, first of all, we can maybe have a look at the notes. If we have a look at the notes, I was kind of confused in the beginning. So the track is in F sharp, right? So there we go. actually it's F sharp minor. So, and in the beginning I kind of had this pattern going like this, and this note was probably here. And while it sounds interesting, it's not really the same thing. So eventually I figured out that what he does is he moved the pattern that you would usually start on the root note, right? You would usually start here on the F sharp. That's not the way that you have to do it, but that's just maybe some kind of easy way or like more effective way to find melodies quickly, because if you revolve your melody around the root note, it's very easy because the root note always works. And what's happening here is that we kind of go down, up, down, and conclude on the root note, and all the notes are put exactly on the quarters, so exactly on the kick. So the arpeggio is actually not kind of moving too much. So what we have to do then is to connect the velocity, which you can see is very different here. Let me open this up a little more. First note is kind of in the middle. This one is very loud. This one is a little quieter than the first one, and this one is even more quieter, right? So we have to connect the velocity in Serum or any other synth that you're using to have a big impact on something so that the melody keeps being alive, right? So let's have a look at the synthesizer sound now. We have Serum here, and I've used the Savisaw. In the beginning I had some Uno wavetable, this one, and that was also quite fine, but this one I liked a little more. So what is happening here, we're going with the velocity a little bit through the wavetable. That's just like a subtle change, but what's mainly happening is that the velocity controls the amp heavily, and the notes actually also control the filter here. And this kind of creates this alive pattern. Let's have a listen in solo. And now let's take away all the modulations, except for the envelope on the filter maybe, that's okay. And have a listen again. So you can hear there's a very obvious like focus on the second note, which will result in a focus on the 2 of our beat, right? So it's focused on the snare heavily. And it just goes along very well with the beat like this. So you can imagine that having this very steady bass line and very steady arpeggio and then very steady cymbals and everything is a great foundation to place this vocal on. That is obviously the thing that the track revolves around. So very interesting way to approach the ideas he had, and I think that actually works pretty well. What we have here is a little bit of chorus, definitely important for this sound to make it feel a little more far away, because if you listen to the song you will notice that this arpeggio is very much in the back. Like it's not in the front at all, which is why we have also, and on top of the chorus, we have some delay here, and 8-note delay. This is very important because what we essentially have is something like this here, like very quiet repetitions on the grid. And this is very important for the melody because it makes it feel a little more alive at least. And then for sure with all the modulation it gets very alive. And then we have a hybrid reverb here. I've used a digital rich plate, and I think that sounds fine to put it even more in the back, right? Like this it would be much more up front, but like this. So it would be very nice if you would focus your ears now on what happens if the reverb dials in, right? So if there's no reverb, how does the sound interact and how does it feel? And if I put the reverb in, what does change? I'll play it again for you. So I made a little more, like exaggerated it a little bit, just for you to hear it a little better. And I think I don't have to say much about this. Like it obviously puts it back in the mix, but it also creates a little more space and width in the track. So a lot of stuff happening here, and even though the sound is kind of repetitive and in like at first glance doesn't really seem like it's doing a lot, it actually does. And especially the pattern here, we come from the 5 but 1 octave lower to the 3 but 1 octave higher, back to the 6 but 1 octave lower, and then right, we result on the root note. Very interesting, works very well. So I said before, everything we had by now, like the arpeggio, the tops and the kick bass, everything feels a little steady and kind of like very loopy. So we talked about it already, that now this is the perfect foundation for a vocal to tear this like continuous loop apart and make the track feel interesting. But there's one more sound that Kevin is using to kind of do the same thing, and this is this kind of bass sound here. So we can have another listen.
Dance with me.
So, what is this kind of sound? First of all, it's very much upfront. Like, I mean, I didn't completely mix this now for the YouTube purposes. It's even a little better, I think, if it's a little raw and shows you how the sounds are made and how raw they can be, right? But if I would have mixed this a little more, then I would have put the sound even more upfront than it is right now, because in the original track, you also have to think of mono and stereo here. This sound is super mono and everything is super stereo, right? So if we have like a very wide track and then there's this mono sound and it's super loud and upfront, it will completely like, you know, take you back to the center for a moment and then like therefore have a big impact. And this is exactly what the sound does. So we have some EQing here and this very important echo, which is far in the back, but still happens, and we duck it away, right? This sidechain compression is only connected to the voice here. That's just for some cleaner purposes, so don't worry about that too much. But let's have a look at the sound. This is what is most interesting, I think, here. So we have 2 square waves, and they're both pulse wave modulated. So this would be the original one, and this is like a pulse wave modulation already. And if we listen to this, it's, I have to admit, not 100% the same sound as in his track, but it definitely works in the same way. So it's somehow low, but doesn't have too much bass, but rather some lower mid frequencies that are very, very upfront. And this is especially happening through the distortion here and the different octaves, right? So we focus a lot on the mid frequencies. We have the filter here, but it's actually opened a fair amount, mainly because of the notes, right? So the higher the notes are, the more the filter will be open. So as we come from those very high notes, the filter will be very open, while it closes a little more when it gets down. So this is something that I noticed is happening in the track. And we can do this by painting our own graph here in the notes, right? If we would have it like this, there's not really a big difference. But if we have something like this, right, because we can see all our notes are in between here and here. So if we make this a very, very strong curve here now, that was a little bit too much. Yeah, so now you get the idea, right? We don't want it to be that strong, so I'm going like this. Then we get this sound, and this is also available for you as a free download, so you can check on it and also play around. I'm always like a big fan of, if you take this sound, then don't just copy it in your tracks, but rather play around with it and find what's interesting for you about it. Like, for example, the envelope that opens the filter has a little attack. Do you like that, or do you rather want it to be more plucky? Make it plucky, right? Make it like this. You can even make it stronger. Should also take away the attack on the envelope then. And you get this sound. Maybe if you make some more aggressive sound, this is perfect for you, right? So just have in mind that I messed this up now, but that's okay. I have a save. Just keep in mind that all the sounds that I'm giving you here are just interpretations of the tracks that we are rebuilding. And for you to make the sound usable and viable for you, what you have to do is you have to think about how this could be something interesting for your sound, right? For example, like you would hear this track and be like, oh, this bass sound is interesting, how's it made? So you come to our YouTube video, check it out, and then think about how you can implement this in your track in your own style. So thanks again for being here. If you have any artists or labels or like tracks that you want to be covered on this channel, just let us know in the comments. And also I focused on the original track now. I didn't really think about like working with the Kölsch remix. That is also very nice. So if you want to have an insight on how he kind of changed the vibe of the track a little bit, he added this kind of big lead melody to it. Like if you want to see this, also let me know so we can make a short video about this as well. Have a good time, guys. See you soon and keep making music.